When I found out what really happened to my son, I'm like, how hard was it to just do a scan? If he told you originally his head was hurting, that's another symptom. Just check his head out. Why? I still can't grasp it. Like, how long? The hospital was not crowded at all. So why couldn't you do the brain scan earlier?
Right.
I tell you what, if this law, this immunity law, had been written so that cases that didn't have anything to do with COVID, wouldn't be protected by this immunity,
That's correct.
then your medical malpractice case could have gone forward and you would have got your day in court. You have to prove malpractice, but you would have had a day in court.
Welcome to Bayou Justice, Breaking Victims, Protecting Power. I'm your host, Chip Wagar, a medical malpractice attorney dedicated to reforming Louisiana's healthcare laws. On this show, we dive deep into the challenges faced by patients in our state, exploring how current laws often favor institutions over individuals. Each episode will bring you compelling stories from victims, insights from legal experts, and perspectives from lawmakers. Join us as we work to shed light on these issues and push for meaningful change in the Bayou State.
Hello, everybody. It's Chip Wagar again, and another episode of our continuing series, Bayou Justice, Breaking Victims and Protecting Power, because that's what the medical malpractice laws of Louisiana do. I'm here today with Jason and Lirette Neville, and we're going to talk for a moment about their story. But I'll begin by introducing a little bit of context of what happened in their case. This story that you're going to hear happened during the COVID-19 pandemic. And many states had passed laws to protect healthcare workers from liability in an emergency, in a pandemic like this. And Louisiana had done that back in the days of Hurricane Katrina, where the governor of Louisiana could declare a state of emergency, which he did in this case back in 2020. And many things went into effect. But one of the things that went into effect here in Louisiana is that healthcare workers, first responders, but not just first responders, all healthcare workers as defined by Louisiana's Medical Malpractice Act, were basically made immune from any medical malpractice claim against them, no matter how negligent they were. The only claim that could be made was if they were wanton, willful misconduct, almost intentionally killed someone or injured someone. But medical malpractice, no, they're immune to it. Well, with Hurricane Katrina, we all remember, we don't all remember, but many of us remember what that was like and how devastating that was. But that state of emergency lasted for a couple of months. This one lasted for a couple of years. Mm-hmm. And during that whole period of time, hospitals, nursing homes, doctors, healthcare practitioners of all forms, nurses, physical therapists, everybody is immune from medical malpractice, no matter how negligent they were and no matter what the consequences were. More than that, the case doesn't have to involve COVID. This is not just restricted to cases that happened, malpractice and injuries and death that happened while they were caring for COVID victims. This is across the board, blanket immunity, cosmetic surgery in Shreveport, anything is immune from medical malpractice. And that's the context of this story today, is the immunizing of the medical industry and the medical profession from any consequences for medical malpractice during a 2.5 year period that the COVID medical emergency was in effect. Today's story is about a young man, Tristan Edgerson. Did I pronounce it right? Yeah. Edgerson? Mm-hmm. A former college basketball player, an aspiring sports broadcaster, and a son. Tristan walked into East Jefferson General Hospital in Louisiana seeking treatment, and days later he was brain dead and dead. His parents, Lirette and Jason Neville, filed a medical malpractice claim because of the misdiagnosis that happened that allowed him to die. This is we'll hear about it. But they were told they couldn't have their day in court. because of this blanket legal immunity that had nothing to do, with their son's case, had nothing to do with COVID. So we're going to hear what happened to Tristan and what it feels like when a law meant to protect health turns into one that denies justice. So let me start off, Lirette and Jason. Tell me a little bit about Tristan. What was he like as a son, as a student, as a young man? Tell us what he was like.
Tristan was actually, I always called him a miracle baby, because when I was pregnant with Tristan, I was going through a horrible divorce with his biological father. He had become abusive and gotten addicted to drugs. I was 6 months pregnant, and I really just felt as a young girl that maybe I shouldn't have this child. But after a long, hard talk with God, I realized this is going to be a miracle baby. Well, he was very healthy, very friendly young man coming out. I knew something unique was going to transpire in his life. So about 6 months after I had Tristan, I had been divorced for a little bit over a year. I met a guy who I was very skeptical about dating. And this guy just
I think she's talking about you.
Fell in love with me. And I was a very outspoken person. I'm like, well, before we go any further with whether or not we're going to have a relationship, because we were friends first, that's another story on another day. But I said, I have 2 kids. I have a daughter, and my son is only 6 months. Basketball. Jason would work with him. We put him in different training. And eventually he decided he wanted to play ball. By the time he got to high school, just fast forwarding, I think he lived a pretty decent life. But he was always a kid that was attached to his mother. And I really love that. I'm a mom. He was a mama's boy in his own way, but very independent and self-sufficient. But it was just, I think Tristan and I just clicked. My daughter and I, we were so much alike until every now and then we wouldn't click. But, I loved my kids the same. I just felt that my daughter had more of her father's ways, and then my son had more of my ways. So together, it was a great combination. His sister had a goal. The goal was, even if you're going to play basketball, I want you to graduate from college, because she had just graduated from college. And so Tristan said, oh, yeah, he was waiting on the basketball scholarship. It did not come. So as he started off in school for the first year and a half, he didn't play basketball. Finally, he was able to walk right on a team at BRCC, and he started to play ball. Things were going well, but he pretty much put it together that this is probably not going to be it. Why? Because when you get on the level of playing ball with your peers, and they're from all over the world, you really get a chance to see whether or not you're going to make it to that next level. So I had that conversation with my son, and I said, son, maybe I think you love sports so much. What about sports broadcasting? It worked out great because my sister was in broadcasting. She's actually VP for New Orleans Saints production, New Orleans Saints and Pelicans. So that was right up her alley. And that was his godmother. So we pushed him and he went for it. So at this time, he was in a 2-year college. I said, you got to go to a 4-year university. He gets over to McNeese. Now he's a junior. And he decides, he calls me a month later and he says, I'm going to start a sports program over here because it's boring out here. They don't have enough of emphasis on sports. So he started a sports program at McNeese State University, and he started to interview different athletes. He had friends. 2 of them went off to go to the NBA. One of them is still in the NBA right now. So he got fascinated with being able to get on the journey with a lot of these athletes because he was so into sports. Well, the goal for Tristan was, I am going to be a sports broadcaster, which he accomplished. When he graduated, we were all excited. We knew that he had finally completed the mission. So we were jumping for joy. I gave him a big celebration, but it was all during the COVID pandemic. So we couldn't do the celebration we would have normally done, but we did something really nice. So, he could still have his friends and we could still celebrate as a family, but not as large as I would have wanted to do for him graduating out of college and overcoming obstacles, because I knew for Tristan, it would be very hard because he was watching some of his peers, some of his friends that he played ball with get these scholarships, and a lot of them were going off to the NBA. And so I know that it broke his heart. But he looked me in my face and he said, no, it doesn't bother me. I'm happy for my friends. I'm happy for their mom, and I'm going to keep up with their careers, and we're all going to do great things together. So they had their little crew. They were calling themselves, I think it was LK. Was it LK? I can't remember what they called themselves, but one was like the camera guy, Tristan was the production guy, and the other two were the athletes, which was very interesting because they were very, very close, like brothers. And then there was also another one of his friends who wasn't really an athlete, who actually is about to become a doctor within the next week. So it was a lot going on. He had a really close circle, and I was just looking forward to what this kid is going to become.
He had three friends, and two of them went to
Riddell. Yeah, but Riddell ended up going overseas. Yeah. And Tristan had a lot of friends that were playing ball, so I don't want to go too deep into all of that. The point is, we were all excited because once he graduated from college, he started to work in his field. His first interview was with the New Orleans Saints football player, Jameis Winston. I was all excited for him. Like, oh my God, I'm going to hear your voice on TV. It's like he's living in his dream. And this is 2 months after college graduation. Tristan would still work out. He would still go to the gym. He was very healthy. He was very health conscious. And then one day I knew his routine because it was still during the pandemic. He said, Mom, look, I know I'm back home. I'm not going to stay in this house long. I want my own place. I'm like, well, you can stay as long as you want. But he wanted to get out and get his own place. And I get it because when he was off in college, he had his own apartment. So moving back in with Mama was just not an option for him. But as we moved into the third month, Tristan's routine was he would go to the gym not far from our house. He'd play basketball with some of his friends, and he even actually got into a league. Let
me ask you if I'm interrupt here. So how old is Tristan at that point?
Tristan's 23.
23 years old, and he's living large. He's living a good life. He's having a good life, and you're enjoying watching him have the life that he had.
Develop and just watching his dreams come true and looking forward to, man, this kid's gonna be, and I'm like, this young man has defeated the odds, the obstacles, because I can only imagine what it felt like watching his friends, about to go to the NBA, and here he is, but he was confident in what he was doing.
I mean, he survived a lot of things. He survived.
Not medical things, but
I'm talking about through Hurricane Katrina, through all of that stuff.
Right. He was able to accomplish so much. So
that was a tough time to be growing up.
It was a very tough time. Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think for us, looking forward to how productive he was going to be, because at this time my daughter was a teacher. So I'm like, my kids have really done a great job. In spite of our obstacles, they have done a great job. Well,
let me take you to March 26, 2021 now. What was going on that day that Tristan went to the hospital? What symptoms did he have?
Tristan came home
from the gym,
the normal routine, and I could hear him in the restroom. And I said, what's going on? It sounded like he was regurgitating that. And after about 5 minutes, I told my husband to go and check on him because he's taking a while. So Jason goes to check on him, and I said, is everything okay? Because Jason was taking a few minutes before coming back.
Now, Tristan's otherwise a healthy kid.
We're just thinking, the stomach 88, something bad. We don't know. So I go in, and I'm like, are you okay? And he's like, my stomach. So we leave out of the restroom, and then he lays on the floor in his room. And we're just kind of watching him, and I get the garbage can, the routine. If somebody's got a stomach ache or he's got to throw up, I'm thinking he's got a virus because he keeps saying, my stomach. Well, after maybe about 25 minutes, I'm like, you sure? You sure your stomach is just a virus? He's like, no. And he kind of stopped talking to me. So I didn't want to go into panic mode because if I panic, everybody's going to panic. But I asked my husband, I said, do you think we should take him to the emergency room? Maybe we should take him to urgent care. And he's like, he's a dad. He's like, he probably just got a virus. Just let him lay down. So he lays down. He looks like he's getting better, but he's still like moving like this. And I can't get the image out of my head ever. He's just like moving back and forth, like, oh, my stomach. He never complained about anything.
A little bit more.
Yeah, and he never complained about anything else except his stomach. So it's at that point I'm thinking, okay.
You're thinking about the Chick-fil-A because he ate Chick-fil-A. So,
but it was like a routine.
Right.
The same Tristan didn't eat certain foods. He was a health conscious kind of individual. Fast forward, we decide we're going to take him to urgent care. But then I said, Tristan, because he's not talking now. He's just looking really weak. And I said, do you want to go to the emergency room? So he taps his finger on his floor. And if you knew Tristan, you knew. Tristan says he wants to go to the emergency room. This is not a regular stomach ache. Something is happening. So we get an ambulance. The ambulance comes. When they get there, I give them instructions because he's very tall. And I'm telling them, look, make sure that we've got some guys that can get him down if that's possible. Because when you're calling an ambulance, they're just going to send whoever's in the area. They said, okay. Of course, that didn't happen. So now my son's got to try and walk down the steps.
Yeah, we all had to
get together, and they had to leave the gurney, I think, downstairs. And so they put him in it. And I will never forget this. And I'm going to say it because I don't think I've ever said it loud. The gentleman said, which hospital are we going to? And I said, well, East Jeff, it's right there. It's like literally blocks, maybe about 15 blocks.
You live in Metairie.
Yes, I live in Metairie. And then he says, are you sure? And I'm trying to figure out why the ambulance driver is saying that, because I'm like, it's the closest hospital. Like, make it make sense. I said, yeah, it's the closest. And he's like, okay, are you sure? He asked me twice. And I said, if you know something that I don't know, and he said, no, we're going to go to, East Jeff. So that's what we do. We can't ride in the ambulance with him because of COVID. So we follow the ambulance. We get there. He gets checked in. He goes in the back. We wait about 30 minutes. The doctor tells me everything looks good. We didn't find anything. They did some kind of stomach, I forgot what they called it, a scan on his stomach. He said, we'll probably be sending him home in about 30 minutes, but everything looks fine. So I'm like, okay. So now I'm trying to communicate with Tristan, and Tristan's really out of it. He's just like, he's groggy. And I'm thinking, why is he groggy?
You sent me home first.
Right. I told you to go home because we were going to,
right.
Everything's good. But he was looking kind of groggy. And I know my son, I'm like, he never looks like this. I said, are you okay? But he's not really answering me. And I'm like, why does he look like that? So I asked the nurse, I said, why does he look like that? He looks groggy. And he said, oh, he started complaining that he had a headache. So we gave him some morphine. So I started freaking out. And I'm like, for a headache? Normally you get Tylenol. And he's like, well, no, we needed him to keep still during the exam. So I'm like, I don't know if that was a good choice. I said, my son barely took baby aspirin. Like, he was so health conscious. So then the guy says, oh, give him about 15 minutes. We only give him a little bit. It's going to wear off. I said, okay, so what's next? So he said, well, I'm leaving. He said his shift was over. He was going to be leaving. And then the next nurse would come in and get him checked out. Tristan jumped up and he said, my head. And I said, he's saying his head hurts. Something's wrong with. He's like, oh, I'll put it on the paperwork to give him some Tylenol. And I'm like, so we're going to go from morphine to Tylenol. He's saying that his head hurts. Maybe we should see if something's going on in his head. He's like, no, don't worry. Like, treating me like I'm just an over paranoid mother, and he knows what he's doing. Everything's going to be fine. Just relax. Another nurse is coming in. He's going to be going home in a few minutes, mama. I'm like, okay. But yet I'm uncomfortable. Somebody else comes in the room. I don't know their titles. Someone else comes in the room, and they wanted to do a urine sample before they took him out of the hospital, before they gave him the discharge papers. And I said, well, he's been sleeping now for a while. And she said, oh, well, let me just try a couple of things. We'll try to get him to urinate. And I said, he's like really in a deep sleep. And she says, huh. So then she goes around and she starts looking and she says, okay, how long has he been like this? And I said, since the last nurse left. And she starts to give me this look, but she's trying not to panic. But you can see the look on her face. And I'm like, what's wrong?
How are you feeling at this point?
I'm freaking out. Let's not pretend. I'm freaking out. I'm a praying woman, but I'm getting like, why are you looking like that?
She calls me, she sends me messages and I'm
something's wrong. So then she says, hey, Doc, I think the doctor was Dr. Grieve. She yells down the hall, how many cc's of morphine did you give this kid? That's what I guess she's a nurse. That's what she asked. And then he waits a couple of minutes and he says, why? Like, why? What's the problem? And she said, you should come. You should come here. So now my heart's beating fast. I'm like, what's going on? And then he comes in and then
Did you ever see your son like this?
Never, ever. They start looking in his eyes and I'm like, okay, he doesn't even look like he's breathing at this point. I don't know.
He started having a allergic.
Well, that was before. Hold on, baby. That was before when they gave him they didn't tell me what was going on. They just said, oh, he may be having an allergic reaction to the Benadryl, because now not the Benadryl, to the morphine or whatever they gave him, because now he's starting to break out into a rash. So now I got all of this in my brain. I'm like, what is going on here? And nobody wants to answer me. They're telling me to get out of the way. They give him an EpiPen. And then from that point, when he looked like maybe he was just still groggy, but kind of in a deep sleep, after the EpiPen shot, I could see his pressure spike so high. I'm like, if your pressure's that high, you're dead. That's what I'm thinking in my brain. Like, did my son, I don't know. You can't explain what you feel in that moment. So I'm like, what is going on? Well, nobody's talking. They're just saying, and they're touching their heads and they're making calls. And I'm like, what is happening? They're like, ma'am, you got to get out of the room. I said, I am not leaving out of the room. So they took him out of the room. They brought him to another room. And I'm like, what is happening? Like, you can't be in here. But I can hear the conversations outside of the room. And outside of the room, I hear them saying, we're going to have to call neuro. And the other doctor is asking another doctor, what did you give him? What's going on? They're asking each other questions. Nobody seems to have an answer.
I was going to say, by the way, is a little bit of a spoiler alert, but I think this, it's kind of like a Hitchcock movie where the conversation's going on, but under the table, there's a pistol. What's going on actually right now is a cerebral hemorrhage. Actually, what had been going on for hours before this, this projectile vomiting and so forth, is from a cerebral hemorrhage that's going on that, had it been dealt with promptly, would have made all the difference in the world, life and death. So what Lirette is describing here and what's going on in the emergency room is a growing realization that this guy who went to the emergency room didn't have a stomach ache.
Yes. And so I knew something else was wrong, because they started putting his stuff in the bag. And I just bursted into the room and I said, what's going on? And they said, are you the mom? And I'm like, yeah, what's going on? And he said, oh, this is his belongings. And I said, what is going on? And they said, somebody's going to come and talk to you.
That's never a good sign.
Never. And so the doctor comes out and I'm just sitting there and I'm kind of going, I've called my husband, I've called my family. I'm kind of rocking back and forth. And he says, listen, this is a serious situation. Tristan is hemorrhaging from his brain. And I said, what do you mean? And they said, well, he's having a brain hemorrhage. I said, how? How is this happening? What are you going to do about it? And they said, well, we're waiting on the neurologist to get here. Now, mind you, this is like an hour and a half later. So now I'm really freaking out. Like, how long can you hemorrhage in your head before you've bled out? So then here comes a neurologist about 30 minutes later. He comes, he goes straight to the back. I hear him coming up. He's kind of running down the hall. He goes in the room and then he gets them to tell them who I am. And he comes and he sits next to me. I'll never forget. And he says, listen, we got a situation. And I said, well, I understand, but what's happening? And he said, I'm going to have to do an emergency surgery. I need you to sign a consent. I said, okay, what do I, is this going to help my son? What's going on? He said, he's hemorrhaging, but they called me a little bit too late. And I'm going to be honest with you. I don't know. His name was Dr. Wang. He said, I don't know if I'm going to be able to save him. Those words just replay in my brain. What do you mean? I can't comprehend it. He said, but I said, okay, do what you need to do. I can't even lie. I didn't read all the paperwork. I just knew this guy's trying to save my son from something. So we signed the paperwork. He does what he needs to do. He said he had to drain the blood
from his brain.
And then he's like, I got to do the emergency surgery. So while they're prepping for the surgery, they bring me to another room. He says, and I'm going to be honest with you, there's only a 2% chance that Tristan's going to make it. I still was like, no, he's a fighter. He's going to make it. Whatever's going on, he's going to make it. Well, after the surgery, he said the surgery went well, but because they waited so late to call me, and he kept saying, I don't know why they waited so late to call me, but I'm not sure what's going to happen. He's going to be on life support. I'm like, life support? What do you mean? But
this is a 23-year-old athletic, healthy,
vegan.
I can't
guy.
Understand it. And I'm trying to be strong. My family's freaking out. Everybody's, my husband's trying to be there for me. And I'm a woman of faith. And I'm still like, it's going to be okay. Everybody calm down. Y'all know Tristan's a fighter. He's healthy. It's going to be good. It's going to be okay. And I could see the look on the Neuro's face. He kept looking at me like it's not going to be okay, but he didn't want to tell me. So a couple of days passed, and then finally they sent 2 specialists in. But this is something that I will never forget. There was a doctor in the hallway. He was bent over like this. He was like this with his white coat on. He was on the phone. And he was saying, yeah, he was confirming that Tristan was brain dead. But he was talking about my son's organs. He was saying he's healthy. He's healthy. He had an accent. And I'm like, I can't even explain what I felt in that moment. And I tried to approach him, and then he just kind of walked off. Well, not really walked, but he moved really briskly. I can't even talk right now. I'm sorry. He moved really fast so that I couldn't catch up with him. So I was waiting to see him again. And so the next day, somebody comes in my room, in my son's room, to start to ask me about his organs. And I said, get out of the room. I don't want to talk to you. I don't want to talk to anybody. I just want this time with my son. I was trying to accept and process the fact that this is it. It's over. It's over. Calling some friends that I knew in the medical field, just trying to get opinions, and they all pretty much said the same thing. This could have been prevented had they caught it early, because there had been similar cases. They were telling me different things about the brain, and I'm going to be honest, I couldn't suck all of that up in. I'm still trying to process what I'm dealing with. And so obviously there's a time we've got to set for them to pull the plug, and I set it up a certain way. I had certain requests, things that I needed to be in place. And one of them was that I wanted anybody in the room. I said, if they're a nurse, I don't care who they are, what their title is, they need to be a believer. They didn't understand what I meant. I said, because my son is going to be with the Lord, and I understand what's happening. So they thought I was in denial. So they set it up the way I needed it. And at the 12 noon hour on a set day, because I felt God was telling me it had to happen at 12 o'clock, they pulled the plug. My son expired about 3 minutes later. And then in the midst of a sad, horrifying situation, I got a little bit of a relief, because a priest came in the room. He said, hi. He identified himself. He said, I check on Tristan. I was checking on Tristan. How's he coming along? And I said, he's gone. And he said, wow. He said, you know what's crazy? This is a priest talking to me. He said, at 12 noon at my mass today, I just felt God telling me that we needed to pray for Tristan. And he said, it was right at 12 o'clock. Isn't that crazy? And I said, it is not. I said, it was at the 12 noon hour that I was told I needed to do all of this. I hugged him. I told him, thank you. I said, you've confirmed for me that my son is going to be okay. I said, I don't know if his mom's going to be okay, but he's going to be okay. And so from that point, we went through what you have to go through. We had the service, and, I did a scholarship for for his school, some things that were dear to him. I just kind of rushed it in. I was just trying to do anything that I thought Tristan would have wanted to get done. And then after the dust settled, I talked to my family and I said, I am so angry at this hospital because they could have saved my son, but they chose not to or just to ignore it. And I said, I need help. I want to file a lawsuit against the hospital. So I had people to help me. And eventually I found an attorney. And I said, when you read this, when I met this gentleman, he was so compassionate. It took a lot of the stress off of me. It was like I went into your office and downloaded my computer and my body and my brain. And I'm like, I have no idea what to do with this. But just read it, look at it. Because I kept reading all of the medical terminologies and everything. And I said, it's right here. It's plain that they could have saved him. But why didn't they save him? And so obviously, you can think what you want until you get an attorney who's as smart as this gentleman who says, I see it right here. Before this gentleman, I had another attorney who said the same thing. And I was just not giving up. I went to another attorney. He said the same thing. He said, but we're not going to be able to win the case. And I said, well, I'm going to fight till I find somebody who's at least willing to fight, whether win or lose. Who's willing to fight with me? This gentleman.
Cam called us up.
Yeah, I got a good friend of the family, the Neville family. He called me. He said, I'm going to find somebody who's going to fight with you. The goal was this. I'm not going to get my son back. I understand that. I'm not illiterate. But I have to fight for him. And that's important because I'm going to show you a picture, and that's going to end my story. I have a picture of Tristan. Nobody believed me until they saw the picture.
I can't even tell you how I felt of what I was thinking.
I'm coming to that.
This is a picture of Tristan. And that's me. And Tristan's dressed like a king. He's dressed really like a prince. And my daughter is the princess. And so the goal from day one was to let him know that he was perfectly created in God's image and that he was mother's prince. I said, no matter what anybody tells you, if anybody tries to talk about you or say anything in your life, you better remember who you are. And he had this picture. And so when he passed away, they made this shirt for me, which is a picture of him on the picture, my little king, because I would call him my little king. And I said, greatness is going to come out of you. And even though my son passed away, I'm here today because I still believe his story is going to make a difference and impact the lives of a lot of people if everybody just does the right thing. Everybody's story is different. There should in no way be immunity in a story like this. This was never about financial gain. I come from a very nice family. I'm going to leave that right there. This was about justice for my son and so many other people that have suffered because of medical malpractice. And when there is no accountability, it's going to keep happening. So when do we bring it to an end? When does it come to a halt where we care enough about the victims more than we care about anything else? What about this kid? What about this young man who had his whole life ahead of him, who made it through college and he didn't even know my son was in a casket when I found out he made the honor roll? So I went to the graveyard and I said, you made the honor roll, Tristan. Imagine that.
You know, this is a case of, to those of us who do this is a misdiagnosis case. This is a case of a doctor who who guessed instead of tested. He tested. He should have tested, but he guessed. And it was a pretty good guess, but he got it wrong. And the downside of a bad guess in this situation is what you've just seen and what you've just heard. It's a misdiagnosis case. It sounds very clinical, very cold, but this is not a clinical cold thing. This is a real thing, and this is what has happened. And this happens every day, and this happens to lots of people. I've seen a lot of it. Now, I want to talk a little bit here about something that I remember when you guys came, and that is this. When we talked about this case, it was because you didn't want this to happen to anybody else.
Correct.
That was the number one thing reason that they were here. And yes, I knew that there had been a couple of other attorneys and so forth. And we did fight this. We fought this all the way to the Louisiana Supreme Court. But that immunity statute that we're talking about, and this is a problem in Louisiana, is our system. It's not just one law. It's a whole system that is designed to protect and privilege a very powerful, wealthy few. And that's what's at issue with this bill that we're going to bring next year. We can't out-money them, but the righteousness of our cause, and this is what it's all about. This is how it can affect you. So let me ask you this. You know, Jason, you rode along this sad and sorry trail as well. How did you feel when you were told that the healthcare system had this legal protection, this immunity, that even though malpractice had been committed, you couldn't, sorry, you're out. Your case is dismissed.
Honestly, I had a bunch of thoughts. You know, I want to hurt somebody behind Tristan. I loved. That was my boy, man. You know, we had the same middle name, and that was not by coincidence. I mean, I from 6 months all the way to 23. It was like the greatest part of my life. Being just like,
you know, no parent should have to bury a child. It's got to be, I think, rank as one of the worst emotional, mental pains there is. And another thing about it, and you all are witnesses, it's a gift that keeps on giving. It never goes away.
Sports journalist Tristan Christopher Edison.
Wonder what he'd have said today, you know.
No, I actually heard when they did Jameson Winston. I was just watching the TV one day and they were doing like a documentary about him coming to the Saints, and I could hear Tristan's voice, and I just kind of freaked out. I'm like, wow. And a lot of people were saying, oh, he sounded so good, and I said he was going to be one of the best.
Sports journalist Tristan Christopher Edison for the Saints News Network. I have a bunch of footage and stuff on the note.
What could have been. Now, something I want to bring up about that night, and what you've described, we have medical records. We know that this occurred over hours of time, from when he got there to when the neurosurgeon was sitting down with you and telling you that he thought he had a 2% chance and all of that. This happens over hours. And, you know, delay in this situation is death, you know. Yeah. This law was passed because, and this is a legitimate thing, you know, at the height of COVID, when, you know, there's people lying on gurneys in the hallways and dying, you know, because there's not enough people to go around. Can't get to them fast enough, and so on and so forth. It's a horrible thing. We all remember that, you know, and you know, I think we can all have sympathy for, you know, a doctor, a hospital, a nurse or something that gets sued, and they just say, I guess I couldn't get to him. I just could not get to him fast enough. I had to deal. You know, we all get that. But that wasn't the situation that night, was it? No. Tell them what it was like.
That right there, I'm so glad you brought that up. What bothered me even more was that when we got to the hospital, I was prepared for an overflow. According to the news, the hospital emergency rooms are overflowing. There was 3 people. One was about to leave. So when Tristan was in the room about to get checked out, there was only one guy across from me. So it was not crowded at all. So there was no way they could have told me, oh, it's because of the COVID and so many people were in the ER. That was not the case. Not at all. There was only one other person across from us, and they were leaving. And the person that was right down, in the back of the emergency room, there's these little beds, these little areas that you go in, and there's a curtain. So you can see all of the curtains were open. There's one person across from us, and the person that was on the end, they were wheeling them out. So it wasn't even crowded.
And this is East Jefferson General Hospital, a massive
It
hospital
wasn't paying
complex.
attention to our
They just
son.
weren't paying attention. And the symptoms and the things that happened, I actually started a nonprofit, PATOS, Pay Attention to Other Symptoms. It's something that I'm working with. I'm working with a few people. I'm working hard on it because I want people to understand, these doctors, I want to put it up in all of the facilities. Pay attention to the other symptoms. The crazier part about this is not long ago, about 8 months ago, I was misdiagnosed. Thank goodness I had my son's case to reflect on, and I got a second opinion. They thought one thing was wrong, and it was something else, which was very minor. And so I'm so grateful that I was able to take my own advice, which I would love to see other people take the advice. Go get a second opinion, because if the doctors are not going to care enough to pay attention to the other symptoms, multiple things can be going on. Or maybe one thing is triggering something else. When I found out what really happened to my son, I'm like, how hard was it to just do a scan? If he told you originally his head was hurting, that's another symptom. Just check his head out. Why? I can't grasp it. Like, how long? The hospital was not crowded at all. So why couldn't you do the brain scan earlier?
Right.
Hours before.
I beat myself up because I feel like, what if he would have had my last name, would they have
Giving
acted
him
a little
VIP
different?
treatment.
Yeah, I'm serious. I was like, y'all, I hate to feel like that, but I wonder, it's like, if that's Aaron Neville's grandson, let's,
You don't want to think like that, but you do.
I tell you what, I've represented a number of, shall we say, celebrities. No, Joan Rivers died of medical malpractice. Michael Jackson died of medical malpractice. It hits high, it hits low,
Right.
it hits white, it hits black,
Yeah.
it hits, immigrant. It does not care. It is no respecter of any class or race or person. If this law, this immunity law, had been written so that cases that didn't have anything to do with COVID,
That's right.
wouldn't be protected by this immunity,
That's correct.
then your medical malpractice case could have gone forward, and you would have got your day in court. You have to prove malpractice. But you would have had a day in court. I want to tell you something. I testified in the legislature to do just that. That this law was overbroad. I will tell you that the state of Texas does that. They have immunity protection too, but only if it involves the COVID. If it's something else, you don't get it. Louisiana's law, blanket immunity for 2.5 years. We put a bill in to bring it down to only involve cases, whatever the emergency was for,
Right.
to narrow it down. If the case involved that thing, a hurricane or something,
Right.
then that's fine. But if it doesn't, if we're talking cosmetic surgery gone bad in Alexandria, that doesn't count. Do you know the medical industry came out in force against it, and they killed that bill. And that law is still the law of Louisiana. If there's another state of emergency, and with hurricanes, it isn't a question of if, it's a question of when it's going to come again. That law is still in effect to this very day. And this is what we're talking about, a system that just protects the rich and the powerful and takes rights away from everybody else to save them. So would you say, in your case anyway, this law was used as a shield?
It was.
Rather than any fairness or anything for
And I
anybody.
believe because of that law, it is probably why I've had to forgive this doctor, but it is probably why they were so nonchalant. Maybe on another day, I've heard things about this. He was a good doctor, Maybe on another day, if this law wasn't in effect, he would have done that. But now I have immunity. So I could just take it or leave it. I mean, think about it. It just doesn't make sense. And I just don't understand where the compassion is until it hits home. And I'm grateful that people know me. I'm grateful that my husband and I are known around, around the world and in a lot of places because I wanted to speak up. It's just like what happened, as we talked about in the John Q movie about the healthcare system. People really need to see this to really get how serious this problem is. There cannot be immunity, period. It has, I agree 110%. If it's COVID related, of course, they were struggling. Nobody really knows where COVID's coming from. I get it. But in a situation like Tristan's and so many other people, no way. This is a 23-year-old young man with his life ahead of him, just graduating from college. And now he's not here.
Because they didn't pay attention to other symptoms.
Right. Misdiagnosis. Misdiagnosis is the number one cause of medical malpractice in this country.
I believe that.
Statistically speaking.
I believe that.
I want to ask you what you would like to say to members of the legislature who are going to be considering our bill next year about our system.
Yes.
What would you say about these laws? Are they really necessary and justified? Sweeping immunities and things of that nature? Or
I would want to say, and it's really short, what if this were your kid? Would you feel the same way? Would you be okay with it? That's what I want to say.
I can't think of anything better than that. That really does put it in perspective, doesn't it? I often say to people that don't, that I talk to about medical malpractice in Louisiana, they don't really think about it until it happens to you. The problem with that is it's too late.
It's too late.
It's too late. It's then that you find out about these caps on damages that we have. It's then that you find out you got to go through this rigged kangaroo court medical review panel process that lasts for years and keeps you from filing anything in court. It's then you find out that your rights have been taken away while you slept. It's too late then. And what we want you to do after you've seen this video and the others that we've put out there for this reason, because this is real, folks. This is real life. This is what's really happened to someone. And without bragging on them too much, these people are well known. I would even say celebrities, certainly in our community, and I'd say pretty much around the world. And it happened to them. If it happened to them, it can happen to you, right? And it's a tragedy. So what can you do about this? What can you do about this before it happens to you or a loved one in your family? Take a look at our website. It's Patient Rights LA, like our state, LA, Louisiana, patientrightsla.com. Go to our website and take a look at the page that says, "What can I do to help?" It'll tell you who your legislators are based on where you live, where your zip code is, where your community is. You can just click on it. You can find out the email to mail it to and so forth. Contact your legislators. Tell them it's time. 50 years of this barbaric law and 25 years, what's it, Katrina, about 20 years of this immunity law that needs to be addressed by the legislature and to open up access to people who are profoundly injured by medical malpractice or killed, to get them their day in court, because the Nevilles didn't get their day in court and they're never going to get their day in court. Tristan's story counts with you who are watching this video. Remember Tristan and call your legislator and do something yourself. Do it today before it's too late. Thank you all for watching this, and thank you for coming and telling us Tristan's story.
Thank you for helping us.
Thank you for listening to Bayou Justice. I hope today's episode has given you valuable insights into the complexities of medical malpractice in Louisiana. If you'd like to learn more about our mission or get involved in our advocacy efforts, please visit patientrightsla.com. Your support can make a real difference in the lives of patients across our state. Remember, together we can create a fairer, more just healthcare system for all Louisianians. This is Chip Wagar, and I'll see you next time on Bayou Justice.